Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining me this evening. And you're going to love tonight's story, but before we get started, make sure you subscribe to my channel and click the thumbs up and the notification bell. And I just want to send my love to each and every one of you tuning in tonight. Let's get started with the story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Nicole, and I'm from a very quaint rural area in North America. But if I give the precise details where I live, everyone will know who I am, or at least the people that know me will. It is for this reason that I would like to remain anonymous, because there are a few wagging tongues in our small town which goes with the territory of living in places like this, and I don't want to be an object of scandal. I live in an idyllic, spacious bungalow that my father built in the early 60s, and it has remained in our family since then. We also have a few outbuildings on our land. At the time, my father purchased the land for next to nothing because prices in those days are not what they're like today. So I'm so thankful to live in a place as beautiful as this. Every morning I get up and look at those enchanting views outside the kitchen window, and I never grow tired of what I see. We are surrounded by the most glorious mountain valleys, wherever you look, and large areas of natural forest that go on for an eternity. We also have beautiful streams running through our land on the right-hand side of the valley, adjacent to the woods. This has to be my favourite spot in the entire world. We even built a little watch house there so we can sit and watch the wildlife on very comfortable seats. My husband is crazy about birds, so he can hang out in that little watch house for hours on end, and he has documented some of the most unusual birds to date, and some of those sightings have been of very rare birds that have visited our land. It goes without saying that there are lots and lots of wild animals on our land. At one stage we had a problem with too many wild hogs rummaging around the place, causing no end of damage to the natural vegetation. Funnily enough, even without the culling, the population suddenly decreased, which we became very thankful for. At the time of the decrease in our hog population, we did suddenly notice that we were hearing whooping sounds all over our land, which my husband said sounded like primate calls. We did, however, know that this could not be the case, because North America does not have an indigenous ape species. There were also times we would hear a strange howling sound from the woods, which was a sound that we simply could not identify and was a big mystery to us. It was a sound that would leave you feeling exceedingly rattled, because it sounded more supernatural than natural. All these strange nightly calls did lead us to believe that there had to be something going on in the woods that was not of this world. Every morning my husband and I would rise early to go to work. We both had jobs in the local town. My husband is the town butcher, and I run my own clothes boutique that has been doing very well for many years because the clothes are pretty special and not the usual run-of-the-mill stuff. At the time of my Bigfoot encounter, I had a little 3-year-old girl that needed taking care of while I was out working. My next-door neighbour would always look after my child, and I paid her handsomely for the job. However, on this occasion, my neighbour, who I will call Shirley, had developed a really bad bout of flu and was relegated to her bed by the strict instructions of her doctor. But she did beg me to let me use Liesel, who was her 16-year-old daughter, to take care of my child instead. I knew Liesel to be a very responsible, reliable teenager. You could trust her almost with anything. I did not know at the time that she suffered from epilepsy, but her fits were few and far between, and she hadn't had one for about 9 months. So even if I had known about them at the time, I possibly would still have let her take care of my kid, provided she stayed indoors, of course, just to be safe. Liesel was very excited to look after little Daisy, my daughter, and she was going to take her for a walk in the afternoon to the stream. We can play there together and watch the birds, and maybe see some deer going and having a drink. It'll be so fun, she said. As long as she doesn't go into the water, I warned her. You really must be careful and keep your eyes on her at all times. At this point, Liesel will share her story and exactly what happened while she was looking after Daisy, because obviously I wasn't there at the time. Well, I was excited to be looking after Daisy because I just love kids, and Daisy's one of the cutest kids I know. At first we spent most of the day indoors, doing finger painting and making cookies in the kitchen. Daisy loves chocolate chip cookies, so that's what we made. In the afternoon, at about 3:30 p.m, I took her on the buggy towards the stream, and we played there for a while. We threw little pebbles into the water, and then we watched the birds, and there were also a couple of white-tailed deer that came to the water to drink, and Daisy was intrigued because they were so pretty. Suddenly they all just scattered, all the deer I mean, as if a predator was around, and they looked very afraid and very alarmed. I remember I smelt a really nasty stench, and then I saw this big humanoid hairy creature covered all over with blackish brown hair with hints of red and auburn in it. It was like the biggest man I'd ever seen, only it was female because it had small firm breasts. I could see that the head was very cone-shaped and the shoulders were very huge, and the creature had no neck to speak of, and very long arms and long legs. I think she could have easily been 7 foot tall and maybe weighed about 600 pounds. Put it this way, she was too big to be human, and she did have an ape-like look to her, on her face I mean. When the creature glanced over in our direction and saw me, with little Daisy, she looked exceedingly surprised. I'm not sure she was happy to be spotted by us, but she did stare for a moment. I truly was so terrified, and I was shaking like a jelly. I really thought this thing was going to kill us. It was like being face to face with a terrible tiger or some other dangerous creature, equally as frightening. I think the terror that this creature instilled in me brought on my epileptic fit, because I suddenly started fitting all over the ground, and then I just blanked out for a while. It was all very surreal. Now back to my story. While all this was happening at the stream, I returned home at about 5 p.m. from the shop to see that there was no sign of Liesl or my daughter Daisy, and I was worried sick because I didn't know what had happened to them. It was not like Liesl to be so late. When I spoke to Shirley, her mother, on the phone, I did ask what could possibly have gone wrong. She did admit to me that her daughter did suffer from epileptic fits, and I was horrified because this was news to me and was something I wasn't informed about. It was a mother's worst nightmare, because if my 3-year-old was running around unsupervised, she could get herself in all kinds of trouble. I'd never been so terrified in all my life, as I had the most terrible visions of Daisy's lifeless body floating down the stream from a drowning accident, because I knew that that was where they had gone that afternoon. I tore down to the stream area of our property and was met with total silence. Everything was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. There was no bug calls, no bird song at all. It was dead as a dodo. Suddenly I saw Daisy's jersey floating down the stream, and my worst fears were realised. I felt utterly devastated. I felt as if my whole world had collapsed, and I just felt totally empty. I just sat on the ground, sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. I looked up to find Liesl standing by my side. "What happened?" she asked, looking bemused. I looked at her in utter horror. "You tell me," I said. "What on earth have you done with Daisy?" At that moment I could hear the familiar squeak of Daisy's buggy coming towards me, and it was what was pushing the buggy that put the fear of God into my whole being. It was a humanoid ape, covered in black hair, who looked at me with a gentle, understanding eyes, and she parked the buggy yards away from me, nodded, and disappeared into the forest with such grace and huge speed. Little Daisy came running into my arms shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, Mummy!" And I cradled her and just burst into tears. I could definitely sense something was watching me from the tree line, and I imagine it was that female creature. "Did you see that thing?" I looked at Liesl in horror. "What on earth was it? And why was it pushing Daisy's buggy?" Liesl looked at me, and her face went as white as a sheet. "I think that creature was looking after Daisy," she said, "when I blacked out with my epileptic fit. Do you know, I woke up after my seizure on the ground here, and I found myself in the watch house. So I didn't get there on my own. Something put me there, and I think it was the creature. You do? Well, there's no other explanation, is there? I think that creature carried me to safety and was also looking after Daisy until a human showed up to get her. I think she was waiting for you. That's why she suddenly brought the buggy over to you. I was stunned. I had heard of animals rescuing humans before, but this was different. My little Daisy could have drowned if it was not for this creature. I went home and did some research about the creature, and I believe I encountered a maternal Bigfoot whose natural instinct was to keep my child safe. So whatever you might say about the creatures, I do know that there are some specimens out there that are incredibly compassionate and caring. I have now connected the dots and know that those whooping sounds came from those creatures, and I think they have cowed a lot of the destructive hog in my area. So they've done an awful lot of good as far as I'm concerned. I was so grateful to the female Bigfoot for taking care of my little girl Daisy, and so on a shopping trip to Walmart, I brought the creature some presents that I left in the woods for her in a very large basket, which I hope she received. I brought her raisins, prunes, walnuts, cashews, apples, pears, strawberries, and the list goes on, including a lovely thick warm blanket. Not that it might not have any use to her, but I thought it could be of help. 2 days later I found a deerskin on my doorstep, filled with smooth pebbles, and I believe that they were a gift from the Bigfoot. So I will always treasure them as long as I live, and I have such warm feelings towards the creature. So there you are. That's my story. I just want to say that that is the most amazing story, and I want to thank you for that so very much. I have heard of incredible encounters with female Bigfoot. They seem to be so gentle and so loving. We're not talking about every female Sasquatch, obviously, but there are incredible stories. I remember my father telling me once that in England he said that there was a pram on top of the hill, and this Great Dane was watching the pram, and he literally got up on his 2 feet, on his 2 legs, and he held that pram until the mother came out. So animals do have the most incredible compassion, and I certainly think that this creature saw the potential danger of poor Daisy getting drowned and realised that she also needed to help the other girl, Liesel, and that's what she did. So that was an extraordinary story, and thank you so much for sending it. Until next time, goodbye and good night.